I've got a question for you. Who's the person you're being? Are you satisfied? It's okay. This is a judge-free zone, and it's exactly why I started the show. Welcome to Be the Person, a podcast for the brave and the curious who are ready to explore who they are fully created to be. I'm your host, Randall, the adventurous one leading this investigative journey of transformation. By delving into topics and asking unexpected questions, we will discover the keys for unlocking our true potential and being our best selves today. You may be surprised by what you find when you let go of fear in order to discover the answers of becoming the person you were made to be. Today's episode, we talk about overcoming obstacles in marriage. I can't wait for you to meet my husband, Jeff. We share about our journey together. I also wanted to share with you what we do for our gut health. Did you know 60 to 70% of your immune system lives in your gut, and it's where 90% of your serotonin is made? Gut health is critical to your overall health, and to me, it's made a big difference in sleep, brain fog, and staying healthy. I'm going to link in our show notes to the system that Jeff and I use, and you can get up to 40% off your first order. I'm excited to be here with Jeff today. It's actually our 26th anniversary, so happy anniversary. We're recording. This is actually my first recording with a guest. So if I'm completely honest, we're both a little bit nervous. So we're excited to share a little bit about our story, though. And this podcast is titled Overcoming Obstacles in Marriage. And we've definitely had some. I don't think you can go through 26 years of marriage without having some obstacles. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff first to introduce himself, let him share a little bit about his journey, and then we'll turn it back to us together.
Sweetie, I just wanted to say, yes, happy anniversary, 26 years. And I'm super proud of you for just going after your dreams. So that is awesome. I love that and love you. So I think just a little bit about me. I think you wanted a quick intro. High school, small town, South Dakota, grew up, knew you and your family, as you know, and then wasn't the best high school student, but was very active in taekwondo at the time, and as was Annie. Uh, from there, just fell in love with that and finished high school and decided to join the army for 3 years. I was like, oh, 3 years, okay, that's great. They'll send me to Germany or something like that. And I remember when they announced where you were going, I ended up in Fort Benning, Georgia. So I was like, oh, okay, that's okay. But ended up with air defense artillery for 3 years, which is basically I had a big missile. That was about it. And I remember walking through the barracks one day and they said, Saddam Hussein just invaded Kuwait. And as a young kid, I was like, who's Saddam Hussein and where's Kuwait? And well, they're like, well, we're going to end up going. And like, we're not going. And next thing you know, we spent 7 months in Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and really grew a lot through that, learned just a lot about myself. I remember looking up at the stars at night, and I don't think we do that much anymore. So it's kind of one of the few things that we had. From there, got out of the army and took a semester off to become a civilian again. And I remember having one of the best jobs I've ever had in my life, washing UPS trucks in the winter in South Dakota. It was great because I had my time back, and this is what I was deciding to do. Started college in 92, January 92, fell in love with college and learning, became a student, which was great. And I remember, again, was very active in Taekwondo at the time. We had a thriving intramural club. We were teaching PE classes and hosted a huge tournament. And our leadership team came together and it's like, well, who's coming next year that can help us teach some classes? And oh, Annie Kenyon is coming. It's like, what? Oh, that's great. Remember helping Annie move in, and she claims that I didn't help her as much as I did, but I think I did my fair share. From there, ended up with a knee injury, which eventually led me to the athletic training program at South Dakota State. And eventually, after 3 years of applying, went to physical therapy school. Annie and I got married in 97 and does what any married couple does. They move in with my brother-in-law and his two roommates to Denver, Colorado. Uh, Eventually, we got our own place, obviously, and let's see. I eventually got into physical therapy school. We moved back to South Dakota, which was a kind of a huge hit for Annie, but we sucked it up. And I remember, getting into PT school is one thing, staying in is another. And I remember that first, maybe it was the second semester, had one neuroanatomy class that I could not rebound from. And I remember calling Annie. She was on a work trip, and I was just bawling my eyes out. And she was like, "What happened?" And eventually she was like, "It's gonna be okay." And looking back, that year that kind of set me back, kind of had to start over. We ended up growing quite a bit that year together, and eventually got through physical therapy school. We moved back to Denver, and then my physical therapy career started. And I remember just kind of being consumed with continuing education, just wanting to be the best that I could be. And Annie supportive most of the way, all the way, I think.
Yeah.
Eventually, I always had kind of an entrepreneurial mindset, um, which eventually led to opening Orangetheory together, which Annie had on her first intro podcast. So, is there anything else that you wanted with that, or?
No, I think that's great. I think it brings up a few memories. Several years ago, we were back at Jeff's mom's, and she pulled out a box of trophies and letters and just old things. And I was in high school at the time. Jeff was at Desert Storm, and I used to write him letters. And I am not a good writer. Still to this day, I'm not, but we had such a good laugh because I would tell him about cheerleading and gymnastics and all of the different things. But I think it was going back, gosh, we've known each other for a really long time. But it's kind of a funny story how we started to date. You want to tell that? Because I don't know if we would have started dating otherwise had I not just kissed you.
Yeah, we were at we obviously both of us were in taekwondo. We were kind of hanging out with the same crew, and I was like, "Oh, this is pretty great." And the next thing you know, we're sitting on a couch together, and next thing you know, Annie lays a kiss on me, and I was like, "Well, wow, why'd you do that?" And she was like, "Oh, I thought you told me to, or I thought you asked me to," and I was like, "No," and she was horrified at the time. But yeah, like you said in your intro, we ended up kissing the rest of the night, and really the rest is history. And Annie was always kind of our little sister, but I remember telling my other buddies that kind of grew up with Annie, I'm like, I think this is happening, and they're like, "What? You can't do that!" And I'm like, I don't know, it's happening. So very thankful that she made the first move, I guess, that night.
Yeah, and here we are, and that was 30 years ago. So a lot has
Wow.
happened between now and then. And if we think about it, those first years of marriage, we moved in with my brother and two roommates for a while. And those first years, I think they were bumpy for both of us, trying to figure out marriage. We were trying to figure out careers in each other. We both went back to grad school. Like Jeff said, we moved back to South Dakota. And for me, that was a hard move back. I didn't want to move back, but yet that's where Jeff got in. So we were moving back because that was his dream and goal was to go to physical therapy school. And during those years, I think we both just studied a ton. And Jeff mentioned it, but had to retake part of that first year. So it extended our time in South Dakota, which was challenging. But I think sometimes you look back and it's a blessing in disguise. And I think we could probably see that a lot with different stages in marriage. But definitely, don't you think through that time in South Dakota, it definitely was.
Definitely. With, looking back, you had said that, I think looking back, it's really easy to see God's favor in everything, but when you're in the moment, it's like, what? Why are we having to go through this? But I think He uses those challenging times to grow us, grow a relationship with Him as well.
Yeah. I think we could both say we can see the hand of God in our story now, but at the time, it's really hard. It's hard to be where you don't want to be. But then I ended up working for a company that was owned by Schwann's that was sold to US Bank, and US Bank ended up moving us to Denver. And it's a career I had for 15 years with them as a director of sales and really loved that job, and I would have never had it if Jeff would have finished in 2 years and didn't have that extra year in there. But let's fast forward and talk a little bit about, okay, we moved to Denver. We both have careers. Get a postcard in the mail for a little thing called Orange Theory Fitness. And honestly, I've always loved fitness. I didn't need to move and work out every day, or I really drive everyone around me crazy. So I asked Jeff, I'm like, please, will you go with me, please? And what was your response?
Oh, is that place over there with those weird orange lights? And I'm like, that's for girls. And you know that I don't do group exercises, group fitness. I was like, ah, okay, okay, I will go with you. Let's do this. So literally, she had to pull me out the door to get there. But thank God that we did. I remember even during that first class, I was like, this is it. This is it. This is what I've been looking for. And we need to own this. So I remember going up to the front desk. I was like, sign me up. Let's go. Sign me up. And I remember signing up, and I just from then on, I loved it, and took 2 years of patient pursuit to talk Annie into doing this crazy thing.
Yeah, because I walked out of there thinking, it's awesome. I want to be a member. We both loved Orange Theory from the get go. I think we could see it built such an amazing community. The workout got results. It was for everyone. But for me to like risk all of our life savings and put everything on the line that we own, because at the time there was less than 100 studios. Orange Theory was not a recognized brand. It took me a long time. And then we looked and I finally was like, okay, maybe we were supposed to open in the Denver Tech Center and there was no real estate. I said, just go look at Colorado Springs. And we live about an hour north of there. I was like, I don't want to go to Colorado Springs. We don't know anybody in Colorado Springs. I don't want to drive to Colorado Springs. But for some reason, we went down and we both, I think, felt like, I don't know why, but this is where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, and I remember we started franchise training, and we were very naive. We After the first day of franchise training, Annie and I both thought, well, this is going to be easy. We can just hire a manager and they can grow it, and it's going to be cake. It's just going to take off like crazy. But after we were both walking back to the hotel after that first day of franchise training, I think thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
And finally we looked at each other, and I said, I need to quit my job, don't I? And she looked at me, she said, yeah. So I remember pacing in the hotel room, calling my boss and saying that this is it. I need to be done with this physical therapy thing for a while. And the rest is history. I remember we found the retail space, and I remember showing up to what will eventually be our first studio. And I just what do I do now?
Yeah.
I guess I just start talking to people, and it was crazy from there. Everybody thought it was Orange Julius. Hey, can I? Is this the smoothie place? It's like no, it's Orange Theory, and yeah, the rest is history.
Yeah, it was selling a concept that nobody had any idea what it was, and really just trusting us that it was going to be this workout concept that they could show up to, that we weren't two crazy people trying to take their credit card number with an empty space that was being built out. But it was a pretty stressful journey that first year of really trying to grow a brand when it wasn't. And then there was extra room in that space that we rented. And not too long after, I quit at US Bank and Jeff stepped in and started Strive Physical Therapy. And you want to tell just a little bit about that?
Sure. So yeah, 867 square feet to be exact. I was like, we need to turn this into something that makes money because retail is super expensive. And I I just had this passion for physical therapy, and it was actually connected, which was great, to Orange Theory. So it was the best of both worlds. And I think it was probably the only physical therapy clinic attached to Orange Theory at the time. And then Strive Physical Therapy took off, and I can't not mention my amazing business partner down there that helped us grow to 4 clinics in 3 years, which is really unheard of. And at the time, it was like, well, I think this is what I'm supposed to do. Get up at 4 a.m., finish some physical therapy notes, drive down to the Springs, maybe start seeing patients at 6:30 in the morning and see my last patient at 6:30 at night, and get home and maybe have dinner with the family and fall asleep with the laptop on my lap, go to bed, get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and do it all over again. But, after about 4 years of that, Annie literally looked at me and like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "What do you mean? Isn't this what I'm supposed to do? Work hard?" And I was just grinding, and she was like, "No." I was like, "Well, okay." And it really made me take a step back and like, "Wow, okay." And eventually that led to selling Strive and taking 2019 basically off.
Yeah. Those were some hard years of just there's a lot of joy in opening a business and seeing it be successful, but also behind the scenes, I think there's work that nobody sees. The 4 in the morning was an absolute normal wake up time for us during that because while Jeff was growing the clinics, we opened another Orange Theory Fitness. We have 3 kids. And so, by no fault of his own, he wasn't here to do those day-to-day things too. So in doing all of that, I was like, we can't continue this pace. We had been on it for 4 years. And it was like, and then the top of that, you did a fellowship program. And so was gone a lot. And any spare time of just it comes from that drive of wanting to be the best. And you are an amazing therapist. But I think it just that striving and pushing to be the best and open the clinics and open the Orange Theories. I think in 2018, it probably started to come to like, I don't know if we can sustain this. Our relationship was bumpy because I think we had been living at about an 85% marriage for a long time, just because there were some things that we didn't deal with initially in our marriage. And then we were just busy. We were busy with businesses and we had 3 kids in 5 years. And you add all of that up and not seeing each other, it was challenging.
I don't know if we really had much of a relationship at all, other than kind of business relationship, and just we were so tired when we weren't working, and it was just we just didn't really have time for each other.
Yeah. I think that sums it up, that tiredness all of the time. I mean, if we had a spare minute, we were probably sleeping. That would have been what I picked. And we take the kids to the movie every Christmas. And our kids would make fun of us because for sure Jeff would fall asleep. I mean, within like probably he wouldn't even get to the
Seconds.
movie. It was in the previews, he was out. And a lot of times I was sleeping too. But I think I had that conversation with Jeff of like, this isn't what we started these businesses for. We have, no life, and especially him because he was going to the Springs every single day. And I think it was a big wake up call to say, okay, but what do we do now? And I remember looking and saying, I think we need to go to marriage counseling because I don't know that we can do this on our own. And what was your reaction or what do you remember thinking?
Well, I think, personally, I grew up in a family that we didn't really talk about feelings. And, I hate to say it, we really didn't really say I love you to each other that much. So I've tried to change that. I've definitely changed it in my family. I mean, not a day goes by when I don't tell each kid probably several times that how much I love them, but and Annie for sure. But and I was like, oh boy, this is going to be the most awkward thing that I've ever done. And literally, I dreaded counseling every single time. I remember walking in one time, going to the counselor. I was like, I don't want to talk today. You're going to have to pull it out of me. And really, every time I probably end up bawling my eyes out and really being vulnerable. But those were some of the hardest, but yet that was 18 months worth of really being vulnerable with each other and really marriage growth, I think.
Yeah. We had such an amazing counselor, and he always, I think for both of us, pulled things out, and especially you on days that it was just different because I had my own journey. And when I was 28, I did a lot of counseling on my own. But for Jeff, a lot of this was new. And so he really was great about, I think, being patient with us because we were learning, I think, to be vulnerable with each other. And honestly, at the time, that was 20 years in. So it seems really odd to say we couldn't be vulnerable, but I think we each gave each other like 85 to 95, maybe 90% of each other. But there was always that hold back, at least for me to say, gosh, is he really going to love me if I tell him this? Or will he understand if I say that? Or there was that whole back and question of will it be okay to show up as the true Annie Randall?
Or if I remember if I say something is like, oh boy, is that gonna cause her to weird, but is that gonna cause her to leave? But in going through that, it was, it really made us stronger. And so she's like, I'm not going anywhere. And I think she thought the same thing. So just we got it all out on the table and hashed out and um, yeah, really grew through that experience for sure.
Yeah. I think it was that understanding that one, we weren't leaving, and two, whatever you said, like I could take it because
Mm.
it was in a kind way. It was in the counseling. But if you had a feeling or something that needed to come out, I could take what you were going to say versus just you holding back because what I made up in my own mind was so much worse than what Jeff ever said.
Yeah, and ultimately, I would just bury feelings. So I brought out 20 years of feelings, and uh, I just yeah, it's so important just to be open with each other and um, share what you're thinking and feeling. Don't bury it because it eventually comes out.
It does. You think you can bury it, you think it's gone, but all those years later, it just slowly kind of creeped back out. But it was a good, I think, journey for us to have to go from a point in our marriage of like, wow, this is really, really hard to every week showing up. And we weren't sure. I remember we had the conversation about do we tell our kids that we're going to marriage counseling? Because we both grew up in families that, gosh, one, we never went to counseling, and two, you just didn't talk about your feelings. So would our kids have the fear that we were going to get a divorce, or would that put more anxiety on them? And ultimately, we decided to tell the kids. And you want to talk a little bit about that?
Well, and they were fine with it.
Yeah, they were totally fine with it.
And, they knew we were just working on each other and our relationship. And I think being open with them was probably the best thing we did.
Yeah. And we've really tried to do that on all subjects with our kids as much as we can, just to have that open line of communication. Because then when it comes for a time, if they needed counseling, like it just seemed normal. It didn't seem like a big deal because we had already been through it together. Whatever that is, we just tried to have that honest relationship with them as much as we could to share about us. So when our kids had something to share, they would be willing to do it. But well, fast forward, I think we get done with counseling right at the end of maybe 2019. And we're going into 2020, and Jeff is ready to go back to work and open a clinic. And do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So I was like, okay, let's do this again. And let's be 10 minutes from home instead of an hour and a half, and opened a physical therapy clinic in March of 2020, right as kind of the world shut down with COVID. And I was considered a essential worker. I think everybody's essential, but I remember driving to the clinic and it was just eerie because no one was out on the road, and trying to grow a clinic where everybody was already quarantined, or whatever you call it at the time, was close to impossible. So that first year was pretty rough, but ended up sticking with that for about 3 years, realizing that, okay, now I'm in the same place that we were with the other clinic, and working the long hours, trying to just grind it out and grow this thing. And finally, right back where we were. And I was like, okay, I think it's time to be done with this. So a friend of mine was ready to expand his, and I was ready to be done, and have been back at Orangetheory since this February. And it's been awesome.
Yeah. I think for the first time, we've done a lot of different adventures and things, and we've gone a lot of different directions. Like Jeff has always been a small part of Orange Theory, but that business has been really mine to manage and grow. And Jeff has focused really on the physical therapy clinics. And at the end of 2020, being back at the same boat we were in 2018, it just seemed like, gosh, didn't we learn our lesson? It just wasn't how we thought it was going to play out. He thought the clinic would grow and he would have more freedom. And that just isn't what happened. But I think just taking a look back and saying, again, this isn't the life I think God has planned for us, to work nonstop all the time. Because again, if Jeff is doing this, I have the Orange Theory clinics and the kiddos, and it's a lot. So I think just looking back, just saying, okay, it was time for us to go the same direction in 2023. And it hasn't been a perfect journey. I think we're both still trying to figure out our roles at Orange
Yeah.
Theory and how that works. But I feel like we're on the same page.
Yeah, definitely.
And that's been good. I think we talked a little bit about this, but just how when you have two working professionals, sometimes one has to give when the other one is in a push phase of their career, trying something new. And I think that's been the case with us. Like when Jeff was in the physical therapy fellowship program or opening clinics, of just supporting him. And then he took a year off because in 2019, we built the Orange Theory building that we're in. I built it with my brother Matt from the ground up. And that was a really big project. And there've been other times too where I feel like we supported each other through those transitions in careers. And this year especially, I think as Jeff has stepped out, he's had a little more flexibility, and I've wanted to get into speaking and podcasting And it's been awesome because he's been there to support and really give me confidence because a lot of times when you're doing something brand new, it's hard. And I think you second guess yourself a lot of like, is this something I should be doing? And you want to talk a little bit because you're a great supporter.
Oh boy. Yeah, I mean, how can I not support this? She's had this I think God really put this on your heart. It's taken a while to come to fruition, but just I think your pursuit of this, and how can I not support it? So super proud of you for that.
Yeah.
She's welling up a little
I
bit.
am. That's what we'd call it in our we house. If anyone starts to cry, it's a well up. And that's yeah. But let's talk last thing, maybe is our role in faith. And I think that's always been important to us. It we haven't always been on the same page though with faith. Because how did you grow up?
I I grew up Lutheran. I always knew that Jesus was the center of faith, and I knew you grew up Catholic. So when we decided to get married, Annie wanted to get married in the Catholic church. I was like, well, okay, that's great. And I specifically in high school, I remember my brother was in college. I think is when he came to faith, if that's correct. But he always fed into me through music, and that's what I would listen to in high school. Cassette tapes of really Christian music, and that's when my faith really developed even more. But I remember getting married in the Catholic Church, which I was like, well, okay, let's do this. I mean, nothing against Catholics, but it's just different. And I was like, well, I kind of tried that for a while with Annie, and finally came to her and I was like, wow, this isn't working for me. I think we need to go a different route, and maybe you can talk about that.
Yeah. He did, and I'm a little bit stubborn, and if I grew up one way, I was like, "Well, why wouldn't you wanna be Catholic?" Like, it works for me, and I'm also usually the planner and the pusher in the family, and so it was, "Well, this is where we're gonna go, this is what we're gonna do," and I remember thinking, and I think I told you this, like, okay, if you're going to do it, you're going to have to find a church then. And this was after our time in South Dakota. We were just getting ready to move back to Denver. And I said, it's on you. Otherwise, we're on to the Catholic Church. And he happened to call his brother who knew a guy in Germany at the time. The two of them were in Germany, and this guy ended up moving back to Denver, and Denver's huge, and he ends up living about a mile from us and was going to start a home church at the time. And we went to that church for the next 3 years, Pathfinders. And it was really, I think, where for the first time we started growing in our faith together. We were on the same page. We were learning. We got baptized at that time. And really, I think that's one of the ways that you see the hand of God in our relationship because we weren't on the same page. And that ended up being something that's always been really important. Even if we weren't there on business or whatever, our faith has been consistent between us.
Definitely.
So we end up just growing and continuing on in a non denominational Christian church. And that's how we've raised our kids too. But I think just having that as part of our relationship has made such a difference
Absolutely.
for each one of us. Well, as we wrap up here together, a little bit about our story and time. You can tell we don't have it all figured out for marriage. Like we've been on this journey together, and there have been some amazingly great times, and there have been some really challenging times. Anything that you want to add or close out with?
Oh boy, put me on the
I
spot.
know.
I you know, I don't think so. I would just say, be open with each other, and um, just be open and honest with each other, I guess would be the most important thing that I think has grown us.
Yeah.
as a couple.
That definitely has. I think once we started to do that and really be 100% authentic and vulnerable with each other, it changed our relationship. It changed it in every single way. And I think we have the strongest marriage that we've ever had now. So if you're not there, hopefully in listening to our story, we weren't there at different times either, that you can get there. You just have to put in the work and decide that's what you want going forward. So I'm super grateful that Jeff was on here today. We recorded our first podcast together and excited to go on this journey with him. Thank you for joining Be the Person podcast. Make sure you hit the follow button so you never miss a new episode. And it would mean the world to me if you gave us a 5-star review.